Okay, so hopefully you watched the video about sketch technique. Quick review. When you use sketch technique, you want to use your whole arm when you draw, not just your fingers or your wrist. You want to draw loosely and flowing, not trying to be perfect and just get a single continuous contour line that just, one line that perfectly defines it. And you want to start sketching lightly. Now, for the sake of this video demonstration, I'm going to sketch a little more darkly than I should or would if I was doing this for myself, but if I sketch too light, I'm afraid the video won't pick it up very well. So again, use your whole arm, draw loosely and flowing, sketch lightly to start, and then make your darkest lines towards the end. And hopefully you've reviewed the presentation I provided about the basic shapes and axis lines approach to drawing. I'm going to follow those steps now, and I'd like you to draw along with this video and draw this bird with me using these steps. You can pause the video as you go along as you need to catch up. So I'll probably do this kind of quick, but you can hit pause, hit the space bar anytime to pause the video, and you can keep going. The steps for the basic shapes and axis line approach. Number one, first we're going to draw axis lines. Now, by axis lines, I mean an imaginary line that divides things through the middle. So I'm going to look at this bird, and I'm going to look at the body, and I'm going to get a sense of the angles of things. And I'll have this bird as a image provided to you that you can open on Schoology so you can look at it on your computer. And you can physically hold your pencil up and look at it. What are the angles of the legs? What are the angles of the body? What angle is that beak going back into the bird's head? And those invisible imaginary lines that you use to kind of bisect things are called axis lines. So I'm going to start with an axis line kind of going through the middle of the body. And again, I'm choked back on the pencil. I'm not holding up near the tip real tight. I'm choked back here. So I've got that. And this kind of gives you a skeleton to build your drawing on. We'll look at the axis line of the head there, maybe the angle of that beak, maybe the angle of these legs, see about how far down that goes. Now, just starting this, I'm not expecting you guys to be perfect. But you can, hold your pencil right up there and feel the angle. Look at the angle. Compare it maybe to where does it line up to 90 degrees. That's maybe a little bit tighter than a 45-degree angle if you're familiar with geometry. Maybe compare it to 90 degrees here. But you can get that to just kind of get things started. So that's about all the axis lines I need. It's a little bit of a skeleton that I can start to build things on. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to sketch basic shapes. Now, basic shapes, by that I mean circles, ovals, squares, triangles, maybe teardrop shapes. Those are just the basic shapes. And from these, we can make pretty much anything in the world. Lines make shapes and shapes make pictures. So I'm going to look at this. And when you look at this bird, you see a bird shape, but you kind of have to break it down mentally and ask yourself, well, where do I see some basic shapes in this? I'll start with the main body here, and I see kind of a big oval. And notice I'm tracing this with my hand. You can do that with the picture on your computer, or if you have a real photo in front of you, and kind of get a feel for that shape. Start some muscle memory there. So I'm going to sketch kind of an oval here. Again, it's loose, flowing lines. I see up here with the head another kind of an oval. And with this wing here, I see kind of a teardrop shape, an elongated teardrop shape. It's going back at a little bit of a different angle than the middle of the body here, but maybe I'll make kind of the teardrop shape. And one thing that I'm doing as I sketch is I'm looking at my subject. I'm not just trying to look at this one time real quick, memorize it, and then come back and draw. It's a hard thing to get yourself in the habit of doing if you're not used to it, but looking at your subject continuously is a really important thing to do. And it's something you'll need to train yourself to do. If you look at this back here, that's pretty straightforward rectangle shape. Long, thin rectangle. So I'll sketch that there. Again, I'm choked back on the pencil, etc. Rectangle shape, rectangle shape, rectangle shape, and kind of a rectangle shape that it's sitting on this perch. I see I've got my angle a little bit off, so I can adjust that. Here's the other thing about sketching too. If you try to be too perfect, you're going to get the lines wrong. That's why we want to use loose lines and flowing lines and fine the shapes, because as you refine it, you get things more accurate. If you try to be perfect from the outset, you're simply, unless you're extremely experienced, you're simply not going to be accurate with the first marks that you make. So now I've got this. So now I've drawn axis lines. I've got some basic shapes. And now this next step, refine your sketch. So now I'm going to refine it. Obviously, I don't actually have a big empty gap right here. So I'm going to kind of come in and fill that. And when I refine, I'm going to slow down and I'm going to really look a little more closely at things. And I'm still using my whole arm, but maybe in some places as I start to do detail work, I might start to use my fingers and wrist a little bit more, but not on that initial thing. I'm going to look down. About how far down from the top is that eye? About how far in? I see my angle on that beak was actually kind of off, so I can refine that now. I'm looking a little more closely. That beak is kind of a triangle shape. Look at that coming down here. I see this oval didn't come out really quite far enough. So if I need to restate the whole oval, I can. And I can come in and start to refine that shape a bit. This feather here, I got the whole wing, I did kind of a teardrop shape, but even within this wing is kind of another almost teardrop shape. I'll loosely sketch that in there, and that's this shape in here. So you have to look for the shapes. They're not always obvious, but if you look, you'll start to see them, and you've got to practice that and get in the habit of it. So now I'm refining, and as I refine, I'm not just glancing at that for just a second and then trying to figure it out over here. Sketching from observation, when you're looking at something, it's like taking an open book test. You're crazy to take the test from memory if your instructor is letting you use the book or the notes to do it, because all the answers are right here. All the answers when you're sketching, when you're drawing, are right there in your reference subject. So I'm starting to sketch this, the eye. Here, I've got this shape in here. That's kind of, kind of detailed. Might be kind of hard to see. Well, I'll look at the angle. I'll look at that. Maybe I'll just try to follow that along. Just take a little piece at a time. See, maybe the eye needs to go back a little bit more. And that's also why we start lightly when we first start sketching, is because we're not going to be perfect. And don't use your eraser either. If something's not perfect, just look at all these imperfect lines I have in here. Don't sit there and erase, erase, erase. Just restate. Restate with your pencil mark what you're doing. And again, that's why we start drawing light. So we can restate it, and our darker lines start to appear as we refine. So I've got this bird. I could start to pay attention to some shadows and highlights, but I'm not really going to start sweating that kind of stuff just yet. Let's just stick with our major features. Now, when I look at this here, these claws look kind of complex, but if I take my time, these talons rather, if I take my time, it's still just kind of a little rectangle here, a little rectangle there that connects to a rectangle at a different angle, a little rectangle that comes out here, a little rectangle that comes out here and then comes down, and then rectangle, rectangle. And the thing about drawing, if your sketch, as you're practicing with me now, is not amazing, that is okay. Who was amazing the first time they did anything? Were you amazing the first time you rode a bike? And I like to make a little point when I talk about the importance of practice. With art, some people think, okay, the ability to draw is some magical God-given gift that only some people have and not others. And that is a complete fallacy. That is not true. The ability to draw is a learnable skill that is anybody can acquire and do reasonably well if they're willing to put in the time and practice. Having a little patience helps, but it's a learnable skill. So one thing I say, you might not be aware of it, but think about all the practice that a football player puts in. They show up for summer training and they work out and they go to the gym and they run drills over and over again on the field, on the practice field before the game. Practice the plays over and over again, hours and hours and hours and hours of training. And for what? Well, the average football game, the length of time is about 6 minutes. If you're counting, the whole game takes a couple hours, but if you're counting from the moment the ball is hiked to the moment the ball is down and add up all that time together, it's about 6 minutes of gameplay on average. So think about that. All that practice that they do for 6 minutes of gameplay. Now, step 4, I add texture, shadows, and details. So I'm going to start to do that now. And I'm going to use what's kind of called a hatching technique, just kind of some parallel lines side to side. I'm not trying to make a rendering here. This is just a sketch still. I'm not trying to make it perfect or completely finished. I'm just going to come in and give some of the shadows, some of the details, not all of them. I might even just kind of block in this whole area, this whole big shape that's dark and this whole big shape that's dark. Some side to side kind of hatching lines there. This whole thing is dark. So I'm just kind of almost kind of scribbling in the shape to fill in the dark values. Value, one of our elements of design. And we're still using elements of design here. We're using lines, we're using shapes, we're creating textures with our pencil marks. I've got some negative space in these white areas here. If I wanted to show those, I could kind of shade in between those white lines to suggest those white lines. How detailed you get is up to you, but this is a loose sketch. It's not perfect, but it's decent, and I refined it as I went along. So I started with axis lines, I built basic shapes on it, refined it to get it a little bit more accurate, and added texture, shadows, and details. And again, when I was doing this, I used my whole arm to draw. I didn't just try to, make a line, a perfect line with my finger and, outline this thing and try to have it be perfect on the first attempt there. I built this. So I built the skeleton. I built the basic shapes. I went from general to specific. Used my whole arm, loose flowing lines, sketched lightly to start, although I did go a little bit more dark than I would have if I was doing this for something other than a video. And then my darker lines came towards the end. And I didn't erase. You don't need to sit there, throw your eraser away for this sketching. Don't worry about an eraser, it's okay. When you do this and when you submit your sketches, I want to see your work. I want to see that you actually have axis lines. I want to see that you actually used basic shapes. If I see just, simple outlines with none of these other marks where you built up your drawing, then that's going to count against you in your scoring. So that's it. That's my demonstration for the bird. I'm going to make one for a different animal now.